What is the Force? This is part 3 of our series where we've been going through Wikipedia, and we talked about both from canon perspective. Now we're going to get into legends, and what does legends material say about the Force? That's why we're here. Welcome to Star Wars and Philosophy, where we give you Star Wars from a philosophical point of view, and we don't go with the current and the trending and the hip. We go with evergreen, what everybody's going to be always interested in, content for Star Wars, and we do that every Friday at 10 a.m. live stream. So if you're watching the replay, next time come and join us where you can chime in on the conversation. And if you are watching the replay, feel free to give your comments down below. But if you're watching live, go ahead and put your comments right here. I will stay on and make sure that I address every single comment before we go today. And you can connect with us at facebook.com/Star Wars and Philosophy. We also do other content, which you can see right over here. And if you're new here, go ahead and smash that watermark, and you can subscribe to the channel at any time during this live stream or during the video. And in the description down below, you're going to see links to lots of other content that's Star Wars related, the Force related, as well as the cards right up here and the end screens at the end. So welcome. Welcome, welcome. We're glad you're here with us. So let's go ahead and dive in. We've got a lot of material to cover today. And I just want to say that next week, next Friday, we're going to be talking about the difference between canon and legends when it comes to the concept of the Force. And then from there, we're going to be diving deeper into the specifics of the things that we've addressed so far. And we start off with a quote, Obi-Wan Kenobi, well, the Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together. That's my best Alec Guinness, I guess, The Force, early known as the power of cosmos by the Qua, was a metaphysical, spiritual, binding, and ubiquitous power that held enormous importance for both the Jedi and Sith monastic orders. Known as the Way in ancient times, the Force was viewed in many different aspects, including but not limited to the light side, the dark side, the living force, the unifying force, the cosmic force, and the physical force. The first two aspects were concerned with the moral compass of the Force as manifested by the conduct and emotions of living creatures who were themselves part of the fabric of the Force. The light side of the Force was the facet aligned with compassion, selflessness, self-knowledge, and enlightenment, healing, mercy, and benevolence, while the dark side of the Force was the element aligned with hatred, fear, covetousness, anger, aggression, jealousy, and malevolence. The latter four aspects were defined by prominent Jedi philosophies. The living force dealt with the energy of living things, the unifying force with the entirety of space and time, the cosmic force with life after death, and the physical force with anything within one's surroundings. Though the Force was categorized in this way, there were no specific abilities or powers that were only usable by a follower of a particular path of the Force. The Force partially existed inside the life forms that used it and drew energy from their emotions. Some beings, particularly the Sith, believed that the dark side of the Force was more powerful than the light, though it was possible that the dark side was just more tempting to those who used it or desired to use it. Others thought of the Force as an entity capable of intelligent thought, almost as a sort of deity. Anakin Skywalker was believed to have this view of the Force itself, and if indeed this was the case, it would add credence towards the view of the Force as a sentient entity. And I have a video on Is the Force Personal? And you can check that out as well on that topic. Though the Force was thought to flow through every living thing, its power could only be harnessed by beings described as Force-sensitive. This Force sensitivity was correlated with and sometimes attributed to a high count of internal microorganisms called Midi-chlorians that were found in a Force-sensitive's blood. The higher the count, the greater the being's potential Force ability, though there were some exceptions to this rule. Force-sensitive beings were able to tap into the Force to perform acts of great skill and agility as well as control and shape the world around them. Sometimes this ability was described as having a strong Force aura. So the first difference that I'm seeing is that in Legends, it was basically only Force sensitives who could tap into the Force, whereas what we saw in canon is that there are some who are Force sensitive, but some who use the Force, but they're not aware that that is what they're using, or some that are stronger in the Force and some that are not as strong in the Force. So that's one major distinction, but we'll get into that next week, right? In 36,453 BBY, philosophers and scientists from several star systems gathered on Tython to share mystical knowledge. The Force was discovered. The Force was discovered. That's interesting. Unfortunately, in 25,793 BBY, several Tython scholars began using their knowledge of the Force to pursue power, leading to the beginning of the Force Wars. Peace-minded monks that survived the destruction on Tython established the Jedi Order in 25,783 BBY. And so that's the next major distinction, is a vast timeline that you're talking about with Legends. Whereas canon, we are very limited. We're limited basically to the period that we have represented in the prequels and in the original trilogy, as well as the new trilogy. So going on, the grandiose nature of the Force made it quite difficult to study as a whole. A student could easily become lost in the depths of flounder in the shallows, trying too eagerly to focus on a speck in the void. To remedy the situation, the Force had long ago been broken down into four aspects: the living, the unifying, the cosmic, and the physical Force. In this way, scholars might choose to focus on the tangible realities of the world and how the Force manifested itself in the lives of individuals and within the moment, or to delve deeper, reaching outside themselves to wonder at the mysteries of the universe on an infinite scale. The idea of a living Force reflects that aspect of the Force which connects all living beings. It represents the tangible Force, the Force as it exists in the present here and now, which flows about all things to allow a forceful being to sense life and death. Scholars of the living Force like Qui-Gon Jinn espouse the philosophy of living in the moment, relying heavily on their instincts and concentrating more on the sensitivity to living things rather than on fulfilling destiny or looking to the future. They believe that the future's instabilities cause uncertainty and that the present held the answers to near future events. The idea of the unifying Force reflects the aspect of the Force which requires a significantly greater amount of understanding than the living Force, for it manifests the Force as a single cosmic power that can reveal visions of the future that are of particular significance. The idea of the cosmic Force reflects that aspect of the Force which connects the living Force to the unifying gestalt, allowing users to merge with or to become one with the Force, but also manifest themselves as Force Ghost. The idea of physical Force reflects that aspect of the Force which allows one to manipulate objects within his or her surroundings. The light side of the Force was concerned with the ideals of good, benevolence, and healing. Followers of the light side strove to live in harmony with the world around them, acting out of wisdom and logic rather than anger and hasty judgment. In order to achieve harmony with the light side of the Force, its practitioners would often meditate to clear themselves of emotion, particularly negative emotions such as aggression, fear, anger, and hatred, since these were thought to lead to or entice one to an acceptance of the dark side of the Force. The largest group of proponents and teachers of the light side was the Jedi Order, who strove to maintain peace and justice throughout the galaxy. The values of the light side were encapsulated in the Jedi Code. The Jedi accepted the view of there being two sides of the Force, the dark side and the light side. A follower of the light side tried to live selflessly in harmony with those around him and in harmony with the will of the Force itself. Mutual trust, respect, and the ability to form alliances gave the Jedi their distinct advantage over the Sith. In contrast, a follower of the dark side typically used the dark side of the Force out of selfish motive for oneself. As such, use of the dark side of the Force was forbidden within the Jedi Order and was strictly considered the domain of the Sith. Traditional Jedi were keen to keep the Force in balance. They attempted to achieve this by destroying the Sith and denying the dark side, essentially keeping balance by restoring the Force to its natural state as they viewed the dark side as corrupt. This involved the purging of negative emotions such as aggression, anger, and hatred, since they could easily bring on acceptance of the dark side. In contrast, positive emotions such as compassion and courage nurtured the light side of the Force. The Jedi Code compared such feelings and provided insight into the ethical use of the Force. Passion was considered dangerous as it could lead to strong emotions that could unbalance the Jedi and lead them to the dark side. Love, curiously enough, was regarded by both the Jedi and Sith orders as something to be avoided. While the Jedi espoused compassion, a broad, all-encompassing, self-sacrificing love for all beings, love for another being, romance, a possessive love by nature, was shunned in the post-Rusan order. Possession of all types was shunned in the post-Rusan Reformation-era Jedi order, the only exceptions being a Jedi's lightsaber and personal raiment. The Jedi viewed love as a danger best left untouched, while the passion that came with love could lead to hatred and anger, as Anakin Skywalker demonstrated in his transformation into a Sith because of his love for Padme Amidala. It could also lead to pity, mercy, self-sacrifice, and compassion, emotions the Sith did not see as beneficial, as demonstrated by Darth Vader in sacrificing himself to save his son from the Emperor at the end of his life, thus bringing balance to the Force. And so this is kind of like the Greek concept of love, where there's different words for love. We only have that one word in English, and they would have a word for passionate or lustful love, and that would be the type that the Jedi would avoid. They have unconditional love, agape, and that is the type that Jedi were going after, the love for your fellow brother or your fellow human or, humanoid, as the case may be. And then you would have brotherly love, and they seemed to have that, and that was okay because, Anakin and, Obi-Wan seemed to have a brotherly love for one another until, of course, he became Darth Vader. And then you also had a familial love. Okay, and so they obviously wouldn't have a familial love because that would be discouraged because they don't really encourage family. So that's just to give you an idea of the breakdown and how that works. With a few minor exceptions, the original Jedi Order lasted largely and changed its structure and philosophy for 25,000 years, despite many detrimental conflicts with various Sith empires and an attempted purge by the Sith triumvirate. The dark side of the Force was considered by the Jedi to be the element aligned with selfishness, fear, hatred, aggression, and malice toward all living things. Such emotions seem to increase the strength and abilities of a user of the dark side, providing a path towards personal power and the destruction or control of all opposition. It was generally accepted that use of the dark side of the Force was extremely addictive. Dark side Jedi were known as Dark Jedi. But some light side Jedi, such as Luke Skywalker, Kyle Katarn, Jaden Court, and Galen Merrick, could use dark side powers. Bane considered the Force to be finite and thus ideally and for exclusive use by the Dark Lord. He eliminated the practice of having vast numbers of Sith at the same time, thereby aiming to concentrate the dark side of the Force into two individuals, a Sith Master and his or her apprentice. In addition, he hoped to eliminate the infighting that had plagued previous Sith orders. Though Bane's tradition or rule of two would continue to influence the Sith for years to come, Sidious and Vader were the final lords of Bane's Orthodox order, which is why Snoke and Kylo Ren are not Sith. And Snoke made it clear that order, that lineage ended with Vader and Sidious. Following their deaths in 4 ABY, the Dark Lady Lumiade, a small but significant number of changes to Bane's philosophy, trained by Vader and having had her significant exposure to both him and Sidious, she had come to view the order under Sidious and Vader as having been selfish and ineffective. So this is another deviation when it comes to what happens after Return of the Jedi. That's where a huge deviation exists between the original, the Legends canon and the timeline of the new trilogy. Given this, she resolved to change the core philosophy of the Banite Sith. While she still viewed the light side as inferior due to the Jedi's history of being unable to effect change, she believed that a proper Sith Lord should rule selflessly, making decisions that would benefit the greatest number of people, no matter how personally painful those decisions might be. In theory, negative emotions like hate would be crucial in maintaining the power of the dark side within such a Sith, but would not be allowed to influence their decisions. Such a Sith would theoretically be able to ruthlessly maintain order, yet govern with compassion. So you had Sith who believed that the light and the dark were essential both. And then you also had Jedi in the original Jedi who believed that both were essential. And it's in the middle there that you have these groups that are exclusive and, contradicting Obi-Wan's statement, only a Sith deals with absolutes. I think the Jedi did just as much, and I have a video on that as well you can check out. The rule of two was later rejected entirely by Darth Great, who instituted the rule of one, using one to refer to the Sith Order itself, which encompassed many minions, acolytes, adepts, and lords, and were led by only one Dark Lord of the Sith, or Dreadlord. Superficially, the reincarnation of the Order was no different from the ancient variations of the Sith Empires. However, Darth Great believed that his philosophy gave the Sith and their power a purpose, unlike Darth Bane, who believed that power was its own purpose. Unlike previous Sith Orders, the rule of one called for cooperation and even some level of loyalty between the Sith. Most importantly, however, the rule of one called for complete and utter loyalty to the Dreadlord. These two rules of Crate's order were designed to prevent the infighting of past Sith orders while still retaining the ability to field large numbers of Sith, the lack of which had been a notable shortcoming of Bane's order. Shortcoming from one perspective, but not from another. As at least in the new trilogy, the whole darkness rises and light to meet it philosophy meant that the reason why in the original trilogy and the prequels it seemed like the dark side was so powerful was because it was so limited. The users of the dark side were two, or maybe three sometimes if the apprentice had his own secret apprentice, but it was very limited. And so when you have all of these Jedi in the prequels, it was no wonder why Sidious was able to become so powerful, as well as Vader underneath him. However, the rule of one did not represent the Sith as a whole, and Krayt was even labeled a heretic by the holocrons of Darth Bane, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Endendu, all of whom believed that Krayt's order would ultimately turn on itself, as so many similarly structured Sith orders had. In addition to Krayt's rule of one, there was a previous rule of one philosophy created by Darth Sidious. In Sidious's case, however, the One refers simply to himself, as he believed that with him the Sith had reached their absolute peak in terms of power and ability. As such, he discarded Bane's idea of training a more powerful replacement and intended to reign forever as the galaxy's sole leader. Adherents of the Potentium were less discriminating about the friends they chose because they believed the actions of all would inevitably lead to good. The Potentium view of the Force, not to be confused with the Unifying Force, was strictly disapproved by the old Jedi Order, while similar to the Unifying Force, which suggested that there was only one Force that did not take sides. The Potentium view stated that the Force and the galaxy in general were inherently good. According to this belief, the so-called dark side was not made up of specific parts or abilities of the Force, as opposed to the light side existed inside the life form which used it, made from their emotions. By that standard, and unlike the light side, all Potentium followers could perform any action and use the Force in any way they saw fit, as long as the intention behind it was good. In contrast, the old Jedi Order acknowledged the existence of Potentium, but made it clear that it was subverting of the Jedi teaching and a way to misguide people to the dark side, or a means to serve it. The living planet Zonama Zakat supported the Potentium theory of the Force as well. The way of the dark, or simply the dark, was a way of the view of the Force taken up by Chronal and those that taught him. It was effectively the polar opposite of the Potentium, but taken a step further. This way of the dark belief did not just deny the existence of the light side of the Force, it stated that the Force itself was simply a small extension of the dark. This system stated that destruction was the universal constant that all things work towards, going so far as to call it the will of the universe. An initiate was taught that if one made destruction his primary goal, that with whatever scheme he was taking part in being a secondary objective, then the dark would effectively reward the initiate for the devastation caused by pushing the secondary objective to success. The Force bestowed upon its users a symbiotic relationship with the environment. Darth Treya, a female Sith living during the old Sith Wars, believed the Force to be akin to some sort of deceptively sinister, indifferent god. She pointed to the numerous wars fought by countless Force users as proof that the Force cared nothing for the lives it consumed so long as balance was achieved. I kind of tend to agree with that. If the goal of the Force is to bring balance, then both the Jedi and the Sith are ultimately doomed at any given point, because the Force is going to either be for them or against them. Hence, may the Force be with you. And that was my very first video on Chirrut's line, I fear nothing, all is as the Force wills it. You can check that out. It's still my most popular. And I talk about whether or not that's a coherent statement, speaking from a philosophical point of view. Okay, so this philosophy emphasized the belief that neither the light nor the dark side was truly superior to the other, and that if people were to be truly free, the Force had to be eliminated from the galaxy. This was generally a very unpopular theory with both the Sith and the Jedi, and this practice disappeared with Trey's death. However, after the defeat of the dark side entity Abeloth, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker came to a similar conclusion regarding the nature of the Force. While he ascribed no intentions or emotions to the Force, he believed that the Force being out of balance was the cause of the horrific amount of death and chaos that occurred in the time since the death of the Ones. Instead of believing that the Force should be destroyed however, Luke instead took the approach that to keep the galaxy at peace, Force adepts themselves had to actively maintain the balance of the Force. And I honestly can see where the new trilogy is going that route with Luke's character. Not when he says it's time for the Jedi to end. I think his mindset was that if the Jedi Order ends and there's just the Force and people using it, that means that the Sith Order would end or the dark side would end, and then you would have more of a peaceful balance where people can access the Force but not abuse it. But he was wrong in that his disappearance from the Force or disconnection from the Force actually just caused the Force to reach out to another vessel to match Kylo's darkness and Snoke's darkness, and that is Rey. The Aing-Tii monks from the Kathol Rift view the Force in a way different but similar to the view of the Jedi. Instead of the dark and the light sides of the Force, they viewed it as having many colors, much like a rainbow. They believed that the Force could manifest itself in different ways, which allowed a being to develop unique abilities unknown to most of the Jedi and Sith. They believed the Force was too complicated to be just light and dark. According to their beliefs, Force users were not strictly good or evil, but instead had their place in a larger spectrum. And I would say that a failure of understanding the yin-yang concept is partly responsible for that, because the impression is that one side is completely light, the other side is completely dark. But notice that you have that little eye type looking thing on each side, in which there is a little darkness in the light and there's a little light in the darkness. And that is what brings balance. The Fallanassi called the Force the white current and saw it like the river flowing through the galaxy and all living beings. A single person could not alter the current any more than a being could divert a river with one hand. Thus the Fallanassi immersed themselves in the current, letting it flow through them. This way they managed to shape its flow without imposing their will on it, which also opened them a way for unique Force abilities. And I think that is the type of, like, the Guardians of the Wills, at least Chirrut, because he's really the only one we got to see practicing their view of things. And that seems to be that I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me. And, you know, saying that over and over again, trying to get himself in the current of what the Force is doing and just going along with the flow. The Sorcerers of Tund shared most of the Sith beliefs, which was not surprising, given the fact that their order was founded by Sith mages. However, they viewed the Force as a magical power and manipulated it mostly by arcane symbols and spells. The Jedi viewed the Sorcerers as merely another Force sect, but would often try to convert the Sorcerers, attempting to convince them to use the Force without any of their trappings of magic and mysticism. However, they were unsuccessful, and eventually the Jedi contented themselves with making sure the Sorcerers did not descend into the dark side. The Killiks believed that the Ones represented the Force. They believed that the daughter represented the light side of the Force, while the son represented the dark side of the Force. Their father tried to maintain the balance between them on the planet they called home. Incredibly powerful, their fighting was destructive until another came to bring peace to the family, though this brought another about the creation of Abeloth. Does this sound familiar? Because this happened in Clone Wars, and then also in Rebels. This has reappeared, and so Dave Filoni is a fan of the Killiks. In the Clone Wars, Anakin would meet the ones in the Mortis monolith where the father claimed it was the chosen one's destiny to take the dying father's place and control the son and daughter. Makes me wonder if Anakin will fulfill this role in Episode 9. Stay tuned for more on that. An intense scene of power would bring about all the one's deaths. The Killiks were unaware of this and waited for their arrival when they learned Abeloth, the bringer of chaos, was freed. The Knights of Zakuul didn't believe in light and dark, seeing the Force as their reward for serving an ideal, swearing their allegiance to their eternal emperor. The more they honored his commandments, the more their power increased. And then following that, there was a whole list of different Force worldviews, and we're going to be getting into all of that as we go deeper and deeper and deeper into the Force, both from canon standpoint and legends. Like I said, next Friday we're going to talk about the difference between what I see in the canon and legends versions of the Force. And that way it can kind of help those of us who are Legends fans or those of us who are not to be able to sort out what it is we're talking about before we move forward into more of the specifics, dealing with aspects of the light side, aspects of the dark side. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, check out the other videos, share it on social media, and until next time, may His power be with you.